Welcome to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with big dreams.
Hello, my name is Lorraine of District 32. I'm here on the Immersion channel for ambitious business owners with big dreams, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here today with Tony Monisse of Brentnall's WA. How are you, Tony?
I'm good, thanks, Lorraine. How are you?
Excellent. All the better for interviewing you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, looking forward to it.
So look, Brentnall's WA, you are business advisors and accountants. You've been, I was going to say around the block. You've been around the block. You've been in business for many years. Just give us a snapshot, please, of Brentnall's WA.
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, look, we are an accounting firm. We specialise in businesses and helping business owners grow their business. We're fortunate. We have a privileged position to see across lots of businesses and the opportunities and challenges and helping them grow their business. So that's what I hope to be able to share with everyone.
And we all need all the help we can get, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting times at the moment. So for a lot of businesses. So yeah, I think, being a business owner can be quite challenging because it can, you can be quite isolated. So yeah, I think all help is good help.
Exactly. I'm really looking forward to hearing you present very soon at our Business Maximizer event. We're all looking forward to that. So look, today we are talking about strategies for success in the financial world. So you mentioned there, Tony, that it's challenging times for us all. What are the biggest challenges that business owners are facing right now?
Yeah, look, I guess what we see across a lot of our businesses, we're fortunate in the West Australian economy. There's lots of opportunity. We only have to see what's going on out there. There's a lot of infrastructure spend. There's a lot of pent-up demand. But I think the biggest challenge is that we see across a lot of our clients and the businesses we work with is, the difficulty of finding enough people, to actually deliver on all these opportunities. And I think the other thing that is becoming increasingly challenging is the ability, is the disruptions that are happening to supply chains and transport, and how that's impacting on the ability of businesses to source equipment, to source parts and supplies. So it is, it's having some impact on businesses' ability to deliver.
And for the purpose of this interview and people listening, it will put a date stamp on this interview, but we are in Western Australia. We have had the borders closed for a long time, and that is what's really having a big impact on the whole COVID scenario on accessing the right talent, accessing the right team, and that supply chain that you're talking about.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So do you think WA is in a unique position to the rest of Australia or the rest of the world? Is everybody facing the same things?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and look, it's probably difficult for me to comment on the rest of the world, but I think, what we're going to see unfold in Australia generally is this, appreciate states like Melbourne and Sydney have been under, prolonged lockdowns, but I think, we're starting to see those economies open up. So I think we're just going to see this pressure everywhere, right across Australia, at least, certainly.
It's certainly some of the biggest challenges that I hear. It's not a lack. It's not a lack of business, but the lack to feed that business, with resources. So, Tony,
100%.
what do you think businesses are growing, right? And again, what I'm hearing through the network is that we can't take on any more business. We're full. We're going to have to, stop looking for business, stop marketing because we're just too busy, to handle the demand. Now, businesses still need to grow, throughout that time. We have to grow and we have to develop. But from where you sit in your position, what are the main components that we need to grow? What do we need to look at to grow our businesses?
Really good question, Lorraine. I think the key thing is it's how we grow. There's this thing called busy fool syndrome where, we just chase revenue, but we don't make any more money. So I think, really what's important is how we grow. And I guess it's, there's a couple of there's a number of components to that. One is where do we focus? What sort of growth do we focus on, given all these opportunities that a lot of businesses are being presented with. And then I think the other part of that is how do we grow? How efficient? Where are the opportunities? Where's waste in our business? Where we've been getting distracted? Where are the opportunities? Are we getting the most out of our people? And how efficient are our processes? I think they're the opportunities we need to look. How can we do things smarter? Is really the other part of the equation.
Yeah, it's not all about chasing the next customer or the next lead. There's a lot of revenue and opportunities in our existing business structures and models.
Correct. And, I think what we're seeing, and, we've seen in the past, and, if we go back to the 2015-16, where we had this massive capital boom, in WA, but we didn't have that in the rest of Australia. It was really very focused on WA, and we're sort of seeing history repeat itself again. And, we're starting to see clients a lot more smarter this time around. So, I think it's important that we sort of talk about the lessons that we learned from 2015 and 16, because, businesses grew substantially, but they made no more money. In fact, they just took on a lot more risk. And I think, we're starting to see, business owners are a lot more savvy this time around, given that that experience is relatively recent.
Okay. So what I'm hearing through there as well is that, we need to look at, and it's another theme I've been hearing recently, is around controlled growth. And how do we control the growth of our business, both with regards to customers and finances?
100%. I think, it's, look, I think controlled growth, I would sort of call sustainable growth. What is sustainable? And, I think that's the other really important, obviously we'll talk about a number of, and what I plan to share is a number of facets, but controlled growth, and you mentioned finances. I think just the importance of being across your finances, understanding what, that forward look position looks like in your business. Because, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many disruptions that are happening to supply chains, to, and all those things need to be planned for, especially, if a business wants to grow and take advantage of opportunity. In fact, the thing that's probably going to limit the growth of businesses is the ability to access, as we mentioned earlier, either, people or plant and equipment and stock.
It certainly is trying. And you said that you were going to talk around a couple of facets. Tony, I'd love to pick your brain around, what is around the financial area. That's your area of expertise. What does it mean to control our finances? I'm surely opening up a bag of worms there, but what does that mean?
I think the biggest challenge for a lot of businesses is that financial statements, as they are presented to the businesses, just don't give you the information. Don't give business owners the information to make decisions. In fact, most business owners are really quite intimidated, from our experience, by profit and losses and balance sheets. And interesting, very few businesses produce cash flow statements, and really that's what it's all about. So I think the concepts that I want to explore with business owners is a different way to look at their financial statements, and by interpreting them in a different way is then using that different way of looking at financial statements to actually forecast forward, and better understand the drivers of not only the sales, but the drivers of profit and the drivers of cash flow, and using that to understanding those drivers to forecast out, to identify areas where potentially where a business may have challenges in growing, or may have challenges in not having enough to generate sufficient profit to cover their overheads. I mean, it could be quite the opposite problem, where they've got these sort of fixed costs in their business, but based on constraints that they might be dealing with, they may not have enough supply to generate the sales they need to make the profit they need to.
So we should be looking at our financial statements differently to identify key drivers and key constraints, and we can get that information through reading our statements differently. Can you give us a couple of examples around what might be drivers of profit or in different businesses, or constraints? What Can you give us some examples of what that might
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. And look, I think if you look at typically in sales, for example, we've got some clients in the equipment hire industry. So, their ability to grow revenue is a function of the number of pieces of equipment they've got out in the field.
Right, okay.
So that would be a driver of revenue. So if there's constraints on their ability to source new equipment and to get equipment out into the field to hire, then that's obviously going to have an impact on revenue. If you look at, so that would be an example of driver of revenue. So it's really understanding those drivers, because often we look at the financial and the dollars quite independently of non-financial type information. So, the key is to be able to bring the non-financial and the financial together to better understand what drives the business. So, that's probably an example, on the revenue side, and growing sales. Maybe if I jump to an example around cash flow, most businesses, don't fully, in my experiences, don't fully identify working capital in their business, and really understand the importance of working capital in their business. So we had an example just recently the other day with a client, and they're in civil construction space. And, just even having conversations with clients, their customers around, maybe how they can bring forward their payment terms on some of the contracts that they're working with, that they're undertaking. And, even looking at, simple things like, okay, rather than invoicing once a month, can they invoice twice a month? So they can just bring forward some of that payment cycle. So just, it could be, and look, every business is different, every industry is different. So, but look, just a couple of examples of, drivers of those, profit and cash flow.
And it's just an interesting question to ask yourself as a business owner anyway. What is the driver of profit in this business? It's a different way of looking at it. I've never asked myself what are the drivers of profit in it. I'm certainly going to go right away after this interview and start to ask those questions. What are the constraints of profit and what are the drivers of profit? It's a different slant on looking at the data.
Yeah, I think, Laura, the challenge with most financial statements is just too much noise. There's too much noise in there. And most people, it's quite, and as I said earlier, it's intimidating for a lot of business owners. So, it's actually looking at your financials in a much more simpler way, to better understand. Because often, what we see with businesses is they're focusing on the wrong activity. They're focusing on activities that actually not going to make a lot of difference to their profit, their cash flow. So, by having a better understanding of the drivers of your revenue, of your profit and your cash flow, you're better able to determine what activities, businesses better able to determine what activities it should focus on. Yeah. And dare I say, like, I can give you an example of a training business where, they were running so many training courses, for example. And, when we did the analysis with them, what we found is that actually dropped the number of training courses because they were employing all these trainers and work on actually getting utilization up in the training courses. So, rather than having 30%, attendees in a course, how do we get 30% to 60% but run less courses? So, it can be things as simple as that.
Yeah. And I also think it's really important to speak to somebody else about your business because we can't see from inside the tin. And I'll give you an example of ours. We're membership, so we always charge monthly. And I've used the same budget. And I was really lucky when I started out business before this. I had an accountant give me a beautiful budgeting and cash flow spreadsheet that I used to run everything. But I've always used in the same way. So next year, I just copy it and transfer it over and copy and transfer it over. And it wasn't until I had a conversation recently and someone says, well, why are you charging monthly?
Yeah.
Why aren't you charging in advance? Because I was looking at capital to grow, where are we going to generate this working capital so that we can get, develop the business? And I just smacked myself in the head, because you just do what you've always done rather than we have to ask people for different perspectives, different business advisors, we're accountants, and ask those key questions. How can I do it differently? How can I get customers to fund growth? How can, we have to ask those questions. So I think it's
100%. Look, there's a famous story about Amazon. I don't know if you've got time, but just a very quick one. And it really touches on your point. A little something that not many people know about Amazon, but it only raised money in its first couple of years of business. And for the next 15 years, it grew into what it was without raising another dollar. And it funded all that growth on the back of working capital. So even though everyone would look at Amazon and go, this business is losing money, on the outside, they never actually had to raise another dollar for the next 15 years because they were, if you think about the Amazon model, they were receiving all that money from their customers, whether they were, buying goods online, their subscription services. And in a lot of cases, they weren't paying out their suppliers for, 60 to 90 days. So they had 60 to 90 days of money sitting in their bank that just got bigger and bigger as they grew. And so it's a great story of, really reinforces your point of, if you can get your working capital equation working correctly,
and do it.
You can fund this growth without necessarily going to the bank or raising money from investors.
That's right. And the key to cash flow is having some.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's I think that's always the surprising thing for me, Lorraine. I think a lot of businesses produce profit and loss and balance sheets, and very rarely do they look at them. They're lucky if they look at a profit and loss. And look, I get it. Some of this stuff's pretty complicated. I mean, I'm trained in that space, and I struggle to understand it. But what's really interesting is very few businesses actually produce cash flow statements and understand cash flow.
A few to-do lists, a few to-do items for anyone listening to this interview, a few key questions and a few statements to look at.
Yeah. I think accountants have done a really good job of making most of the stuff we produce quite, unreadable and incomprehensible. So I suspect that's why we still have a gig. So hopefully I can demystify some of the stuff that accountants do.
That's right. I think, Tony, what should we be focusing on in business today? What's that number one thing that we should be focusing on for any industry?
I think the most important thing, if I was going to say the most important thing, and look, this, not only in addition to understanding the numbers and the drivers and the growth, which I think is really, really important, but I think the most important thing, and I'll put it down to three key questions that every business should really focus on, and I'll expand on more that as part of my presentation. But the first question is, where are you going to play? Who's your target customer? Being really clear on that, especially in the current environment where there's just so much opportunity, and that's one of the things that I see a lot of businesses get caught out. The second question is, how are you going to win? Like, what's your value proposition? What's your competitive? How are you going to win? What's your value proposition? Are you going to win on service? Are you going to win on price? Are you going to win on availability? What is it? What are you driving to win? What's going to differentiate you from your competitors? And then the third question, which is often a really underestimated question, and I think it's probably, one of the most important questions, is what capabilities, if you've decided where you're going to play, who your target customer is, how you're going to win, what capabilities do you require to win in that space? And then really focus on that. And the biggest challenge that businesses get in is they go wider than that. They focus all over they're trying to win everything. They've got no clarity of focus, and hence they engage in all this sort of wasteful activity. So, especially in the current environment, it's really, my experience of working with, a number of clients that we work with is getting that real absolute clarity of focus.
And I think that, I've heard you speak before, Tony, on competitive advantage and, how you're going to win in the marketplace. And I find sometimes that, a lot, that business owners think that they have to decide what that is within what they're doing now and find something different within what they're doing. But rather what we can do is decide how we're going to do it in the future and then look to match those capabilities to match that vision. It doesn't have to come from what you're doing right now and how am I doing it better than anybody else.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, it's the importance of, I think that's where it's really important to talk to your customers and understand what's important to them, especially your target customers. And like you say, you can recruit, you can bring that capability in, or, you can retrain, reskill, it doesn't have to happen overnight, but it might be that, look, we want to play in a certain space that we haven't previously played, or we want to expand our capabilities. So yeah, like you say, for example, a business may recruit someone in or buy a new piece of equipment that just reinforces that capability that, previously they didn't have, but is going to be important to their target customer and is going to help them win new work. So, yeah.
And I like something else you said there around, you have to talk to your customers, because sometimes we forget. We're too busy on the business or, in the operations, we're not actually talking to our customers all the time. And I heard a story this morning about, the owner of Spanx, went to, $1 million company, and they were asking her, how did you do that so quickly? And she said, I was on the shop floor. Nobody knew who I was. I was on the shop floor all the time. I was never, working on the strategy. I was always just on the floor all day listening to my customers. Listen, develop, listen, develop, listen, develop. And, how you would think it's profound, huh? Well, how do we do it? We spoke to our customers, and it's just so important to keep your eye, keep some skin in the game.
Yeah, look, I think it highlights the importance of leadership. That example, Lorraine, and just reading Jim Collins' latest book, Be 2.0, and he talks about the attributes of what makes a great leader. And I have a client that I've worked with over a number of years who has an extremely successful business and grown substantially. And he talked about the great leaders. This client of mine talked about what he believes is a great leader, and which has also been reaffirmed, in Jim Collins' book, in my mind. But they have this great ability to touch all parts of the organisation. So they can be on, like you say, they can be on the shop floor and they understand what's happening with the customers, with the staff. But they can also, be at board meetings or management meetings and still connect at that level. So I think that. That ability to, you just got to get out of your office, like you say, and you've got to be able to touch all parts of your organization. You've got to talk to your customers. You've got to understand what your team are dealing with. But you've still got to, climb back up into that helicopter view and, decide, where we're going to, what are we going to focus on? Yeah. But I think a great example.
I think that the information, you've given us there is really great. And I have myself taken away a few questions. And even if you have heard them before, it's time to revisit them. What are those drivers? But Tony, I'd like to ask you one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So imagine that your time on this earth is done. And you can only give business owners one piece of advice. What would it be?
Yeah, I guess my passion is that interplay between your numbers and your strategy, right? So how do your numbers inform your strategy? And I guess I come from a financial background, but I just find that the numbers are where the rubber hits the road, right? Like you can do all this wonderful thing, but if you haven't got any money in the bank or whatever. So I just think, if you have if I look at this client I was just talking about, I mean, he's growing that business substantially on a real strong grasp and understanding of his numbers. And I am biased because of my background, but there's lots of other wisdom out there. But if I was coming from my real passion, is how do you connect your numbers and your strategy?
Beautiful. So you're leaving us with another corker of a thought-provoking question. Thank you, Tony.
That's all right. All good, Lorraine.
Thank you very much, Tony. This has been really, really great. Some really great nuggets in there. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you. And as I say, I'm really looking forward to seeing you present for us very soon. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. And I'm looking forward to getting into a room with a group of business people and sharing stories.
That's what it's all about. Thank you very much, Tony.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Cheers.
You've been listening to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with big dreams.